So yeah, Katharine, thank you very much for your time. I'm very grateful. So obviously you first came to prominence by writing a blog about your kind of experiences in as a teacher in inner city schools. I mean, how much were you surprised by what you found in the city schools?
Um, well, it's interesting. When I first became a teacher, I had this idea that there was loads of institutionalized racism
Yeah,
in schools, and that was why, let's say, black children, for instance, were not performing as well as they should do. And while I would never deny that there's racism in the world and so on, what I discovered was that it was far less about that and more about children not behaving themselves. And
yeah,
I found that throughout my career, and it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about black kids or white kids or working class kids or whatever it is, what I found is that if a community and if a child feels that he is a victim, and that the establishment is against him, and if all of his family and friends and so on tell him this all the time, there's no way you can succeed because the man is against you, because the establishment is against you, he probably won't succeed. Because if you don't think you can, you can't. I mean,
yeah.
that's a kind of general saying all the time, where there's a will, there's a way. And if everyone tells you that the system is set up against you, then you're just very unlikely to succeed. And it may very well be that the system is against you.
Yeah.
My point is that if you keep saying that and indulging that sense of victimhood, then you are undermining the child ultimately. Because what you need is a relationship between the family and the school for the child to succeed. The family needs to trust the school. And if the family is convinced, you're picking on my boy because he's black, you're picking on my boy because he's working class, you're picking on my boy because he's a boy, for whatever the reasons are, if you think that, the 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 parent will encourage the child in his feeling of injustice because he got a detention for whatever reason, and ultimately the child won't be treated like a normal child. Oh, you're a bit naughty, but detention. Okay, then I'll learn my lesson and now I'm going to change. He's not going to change. He's going to dig his heels in and he's going to feel justified in his anger towards the people who have authority over him.
I mean, do you think there's a kind of bigotry of low expectations from some kind of well-meaning liberals, well-meaning progressives, towards poor children and I guess kind of inner city children,
Yeah.
which is very damaging to education?
Yeah, I do. And it's really sad because those people are very well meaning. And
Yeah,
they work very, very hard, right? So people are killing themselves, working all hours, trying to help these children. But if you indulge that victim mentality, if you feel uncomfortable because you are white and privileged,
yeah,
um, at holding a child to account because he's black or because he's working class, something that you aren't,
yeah,
then if you're uncomfortable about it, you think, well, I don't really know what his home life is like. And maybe it does make sense that he didn't do his homework because, you know, poor boy, he doesn't have a room where he can do his homework with his own desk. And so I'm going to let it go this time.
yeah,
And when you feel uncomfortable like that, what you need to remember is if you don't hold the line, you're letting the child down. But that's really hard, especially when the powers that be might accuse you of racism, for instance, if there are too many black boys going to detention.
yeah,
Because then you think, well, am I racist? I don't want to be racist. Okay, I won't give the black boys detention. But not giving them a detention is to harm those children because that means the expectations are lowered for them. And that means those children get away with more bad behavior. Their behavior begins to deteriorate even more. And in the end, you're not helping these children. Um, I'm constantly being accused of being some kind of Nazi, for instance,
yeah.
which of course I really look like a
Seems
Nazi, don't I?
improbable.
But they accuse me of this because I hold the line and I believe in high expectations of behavior and I believe in systems in a school to support the teachers. And because of that, people get very angry and say, oh, but you're putting children in detention. Oh, you don't let the small things go. Well, I don't.
Yeah.
Because I love the children. That's why. It's because I know that making the difficult decisions in the moment are what will enable those children to succeed later on in life.
I mean, do you think perhaps one of the reasons why there's a kind of division within, um, over discipline, that kind of thing, is that the educational establishment or a lot of the education establishment may send their children to better schools already, and is there kind of divide between where different people within the educational system are saying their own children? Does that kind of bleed into?
I think what you're referring to there is, yes, I think much of the political class are totally out of touch with what's going on the ground. The children aren't in these schools. They mix in dinner parties with people who don't have the lives of the families that are at our school, for instance, or I've known all my career. So they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I always say that people like to feel good at dinner parties. So they want to be able to sit at a dinner party and feel like a good person. Oh, I voted in this way and that makes me a good person. Or I feel sorry for the poor children of the inner city. And so what we must do is pour more money into the inner city. Now, look, I'm always for more money and I wish I had more, right? And obviously I'd be able to run a better school with more money. There's no question, right? But the ideas and the values are far more important than money. And that's something that often people in the political classes don't understand. There are certain values that have almost completely disappeared from our society, like a sense of personal responsibility. So on the one hand, we are encouraging this indulgence of victimhood, as opposed to saying, I'm responsible for myself. It's true there are obstacles in front of me. It's true that it's harder for me because I'm growing up in the inner city and I never see my father, and there are gangs here and there are children outside with knives. I get that. It's not easy. But you've got to grab the bull by the horns and go, I'm going to make something of my life. And that means I'm going to work really hard while I'm at school. I'm going to get the best GCSEs that I can get. And then I'm going to become someone who can make changes and have impact in the world. But that isn't what happens ultimately. And sadly, it doesn't happen because values like the sense of personal responsibility, the sense of duty towards others. So what are you going to do with your life? Are you going to do something where you're going to help the world become a better place? Are you going to have a sense of duty to the rest of your classmates? I'm not going to disrupt because they too want to learn. A sense of obligation towards those people. These are small C conservative values that have sort of disappeared ultimately, I think, from our society. And I blame all the political people, I mean, all parties. I don't think the big C conservatives are very small C conservative, and I wish they were. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. And too many of the important ones are not small C conservative, and they need to be, because they need to speak openly about how these values make our society stronger. One of the things I know that your newspaper has spoken about with regard to what we do, we believe in Queen and country. Now, people look at me and say, what? You sing God Save the Queen, you sing I Vow to Thee My Country, you sing Jerusalem. We sing it all together at assembly. And every day the children coming in and we are singing. And when the Queen had her, I can't even remember which wedding anniversary it was, 70th, 75th, it must have been, and something anyway. We did a card and all the kids drew her and wrote things and we sent her this card and then we got a response. We put it up in the lobby and said, look, the Queen. Now, the reason for that is because we believe in being British. And we believe, whatever colour you are, whatever class you are, we are all British. And we're all one big family. And the Queen is at the head of that family. Now, to be honest, I'm not much of a royalist. I'm not, right? I mean, I don't actually care that much about the Queen, if the truth be told. But I know how important it is for our children, especially children in the inner city, to feel like they belong. Because if they don't feel British, we are all in trouble, okay? It's not just them. They won't succeed, okay? They're in trouble. But we are all in trouble. Because you can't have a country that succeeds when half the people in the country don't feel that they're part of the country, right? Everybody has to buy into British values. And those values ought to be personal responsibility, duty, obligation, a belief in country, a belief in being faithful to your country. And that film made, what's his name? I can't remember the director. They Shall Not Grow Old. Did you see the wonderful film that they made of the old footage of World War One? And they slowed it down and put color on it. It was the most amazing thing. We watched it here. Some of the staff watched it. And it's this wonderful feeling of this is what Britain did, Now, the thing is that sadly, I don't think our history is taught that in that way. And everybody's taught this real sense of shame over British history. And look, of course, Britain did things that it should be ashamed of. But so is every other country. and that's what history is. It doesn't mean that you can be critical of things that your country might have done, some of those things, but you can also feel a deep sense of pride because it is your country. And I think the political classes and unfortunately our education system divides our children. Race plays far too important a point on this. It shouldn't matter what color you are. We're all British. And when, as a teacher, you deny that feeling of Britishness to your children, in particular to your ethnic minority children, you are doing them a great disservice, because feeling like you belong and feeling British, one of the basic building blocks to being able to be successful.
I mean, have you been surprised by the way the education establishment has reacted to your ideas?
No, I have not been surprised. I realize I'm really radical, and I realize that what I'm saying can be quite objectionable to people, and I'm trying my best not to offend. I don't want to offend them. I want to persuade.
Yeah.
I want to persuade people that I don't come to school every morning at 6:30, and I haven't worked in this for 20 years because I hate children. I've always worked in the inner city. I've always worked with disadvantaged children. When in 2010 I gave my speech at the Conservative Party conference and I was out of a job and I didn't know what to do, I was told I would never work in the state sector again. I could have gone to the private sector. I didn't want to. And I have nothing against the private sector, but I didn't want to because I love working with disadvantaged kids and changing their lives. So I haven't done this for 20 years. For me, I've done it because I believe in something. So I want to beg people to listen to me. And the school is a testament to what I believe in. You know, like I know we have teachers every day who come to visit us, you know, from across the country and the world. And they come and they say, it's amazing the resilience your children have and the confidence and how happy they are, you know, and they're going to go out there and charge ahead. And they are. And but why is that? Because we sing hymns and we recite poetry like Kipling's If, for instance. You know, once a journalist came in here and he said, that's really shocking. You're getting them to recite If. And I thought, well, it's a beautiful poem. It has all the most wonderful pieces of advice on how to live a successful life. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Sadly, I think we can be a bit scared of our own history. We can be scared of our own literature, our own great poets and writers, because of this sense of not wanting to be racist. And that doesn't mean I can't be critical of those writers, right? I recognize that we are all flawed, but there are we have a beautiful history in many ways. That doesn't mean that the slave trade was right. That doesn't mean that colonialism was right. I'm not saying that, right? Clearly I'm not. You know, my father's from Guyana. My mother's from Jamaica. My father grew up without any shoes. I know what it's like to come from a modest background. But I also know what it takes to succeed from a modest background. And that requires a real sense of purpose and will. And sadly, I think our education system in many ways doesn't instill that in children because, as you say, the kind of guilt that some privileged people will have, often white middle-class people, it prevents them from doing what's right by these children.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously this school's been very successful. I was reading your state of sports last night. But do you feel that your kind of teaching methods are spreading out? Is this something which is becoming more popular, more prevalent, or is this still very much a kind of isolated example?
Yeah. No. I mean, as I say, we have teachers that visit all the time, and people take ideas and they write letters. I mean, you know, I've got this whole book of all these letters here from staff from other schools, head teachers, deputies, even heads from private schools who come here and they say, gosh, Katharine, well, you know, it's a really different context, but you've given me a lot of food for thought, you know?
Yeah.
And people take these ideas, and what are the ideas? That the teacher should be in charge. I always say the teacher should be driving the bus. And the teacher leads the learning. The child doesn't lead the learning. You don't have group work where the children are leading the learning and the teacher is the facilitator of learning, moving amongst the desks, just keeping the children on task. It's the teacher at the front saying, this is where we're going, follow me, you know?
Yeah.
And That is 50 years ago, that was normal. Over the last 50 years, we've lost that. I think we're regaining that ground, which is wonderful. You see, I think part of the reason why that's happened is because we have felt a certain shame around some of the things that we have been teaching the children. And if you're ashamed of your history, then better let the children just lead it and just give them different sources. Look at these different sources and you decide what you think what really happened, as opposed to, I'm the teacher, I know, and I'm taking charge. I think also that we can shy away from the idea of authority and obedience. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to march around like some kind of drill sergeant, but you do need to expect children to be obedient, and you need to believe that you are the authority in the room. Too often I hear teachers sort of equating themselves with the children and saying, well, we all learn together and we're all sharing together. And that doesn't mean that children can't. Often children say something to me, not necessarily about the history of Britain, but about, about how to use your iPhone or stuff that they do know lots about, and they do teach you things. Of course they do. I've got a boy on report to me at the moment, and he likes working out, and so he does lots of push-ups. And I said, right, well, if you manage to get a day without detentions, I'm going to do push-ups. And I was saying, I do push-ups on my knees, girl push-ups as opposed to boy push-ups, which are on your feet, And then I managed to do one push-up. I realized to some people this may seem ridiculous that I can't do a push-up, but I did one push-up, and I said to him, right, I've done one push-up. Now, do you know, the other day I managed to do 7. I gradually, bit by bit, where there's a will, there's a way. Now, I have never really done proper push-ups before in my entire life. Because of this boy, I can now do 7 proper push-ups, right? And he, every day, is going through school without detentions. Now, I understand there can be a bond between the teacher and the child, and you can do something. Here I am at 45 years old, and I've achieved something because of that boy. So that is possible. However, when it comes to teaching in the lesson, the teacher is the authority, and the teacher needs to be leading the way.
I mean, do you think there's a kind of progressive squeamishness around discipline, which is having a very serious adverse effect, obviously disproportionately on public poor schools, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as someone who was not that long ago at school myself, I mean, one bad pupil or one disruptive pupil,
that's right,
can make an entire class ungovernable.
That's right, and that's key, right? So what people always see is, but what about that poor child? But what about the 29 others, or the other 119 in the year group, or the entire school for that matter? It's really important to remember all children, and the advocates for reducing behavior standards don't think about all children. They're thinking about that one child. And the thing is, what they also don't get is that they're also letting that child down. In order to support children, we need to keep our standards high. And so that means praise and punishment. That's what that means. Children react well to brilliant work, that's a merit for you, or so proud of you. This child is on report to me. I'm so proud of you. I'm doing my push-ups. You're not getting detentions. Well done. But if you were to get a detention, well, we're not letting you off, because we look at you and say, oh, well, you're from the inner city, or your father isn't around, or it's difficult for you. No, we hold our standards high so that he can keep meeting those standards. You have to give them huge amounts of support and love, but you also need to hold your standards high. And people who make excuses for them and let them off the hook are taking the easy way out. It is much harder to discipline. It is much harder to hold your standards high. But you do it because you love them, because you know that in the end they will succeed thanks to you making the difficult decisions in the moment.
Yeah. Now, we were talking about this before we went on camera, which is about potential, obviously, for Labour government and what that would mean for the free school movement. I mean, is that kind of your concerns about both for your individual school and for kind of the movement more generally?
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern. I love free schools, and I love them because they can do things differently and they break up the system. And a monopoly in any system is not good. It prevents innovation from happening. It prevents change from happening. I don't think it's any coincidence that all of these new ideas that are happening in education, us moving more towards traditionalism, us having teachers standing at the front and teaching, us remembering how behavior standards need to be really high, that is spreading because of the free school movement. Okay, so we wouldn't have one without the other. You need monopolies will not allow innovation. That's the key thing that we need to remember. So yes, it would be a concern. I do think, however, that free schools have been around for so long. You know, Labour government called them parent-led academies. There's not much of a difference. The thing that I'm concerned just generally with society, more so with the Labour government, but equally with the, well, not equally, but I'm also concerned with the Conservatives, is the lack of small c conservative values. And that is what's important. So they talk about knife crime and they say, why is knife crime happening? Oh, it's because we don't have enough policemen out. And yes, on the surface, you might say it's because there aren't enough policemen around. But why is it happening in the first place? You got to dig deep to find the wound. What is the problem, right? And the problem is children not feeling like they're British, children not being disciplined in schools, children, when I say disciplined, I mean low-level disruption. Yeah. If you let the low-level disruption fall apart, then in the end, those children end up carrying knives. That's the end result. Now, that will always be the case in the inner city, but it's more of them that will happen to, right? And they see it the other way around. They think that actually, if you discipline kids, then they end up carrying knives. It's exactly the opposite. So, and nobody's arguing against it, right? In terms of the politicians. I mean, there are ordinary people on the ground who are trying to argue against it. But the politicians don't even understand what I'm talking about. They literally have no idea because they are not talking to people on the ground. And that really annoys me, that the people who know this stuff, nobody's interested in what we have to say, right? And it really upsets me because those children need our help. And we are only interested in helping ourselves. And what I mean by that is in feeling good at dinner parties and saying, aren't I a lovely person? And, oh, of course, what we need to do is get more policemen out. And if we did that, then everything would be fine. Look, yes, it's always great to have more policemen, to have more teachers. Essentially, that's about money. That's an argument about money. That's what that is, right? And that's good. That's good to have more out there. But you don't fix a problem just by putting plasters on top of the wound. You have to look at the source, right? And the source is the destruction of our society, that it's falling apart because there are too many people who don't feel like they belong. There are too many children in schools, in chaotic classrooms, where they're not learning anything, where they're not being led. And if you aren't being led by your queen and your country, if you're not being led by your prime minister, if you are not being led by the head of your school and by the teacher in your classroom, it's all coming down, right? If you aren't being led as a child, you will spin out of control, especially if you don't have that support at home. The family is so important. The state is constantly undermining the family. Now, if the family were revered, and if the media were to talk about the importance of family, for instance, and families having the right kinds of values to support their children, how much difference would that make? But the media aren't interested either, because the whole of our society is kind of fallen apart. And we need to pull it back, and that's what we're doing here, right? We're doing that here. We're pulling it back together, but I need other people doing it too, right? That's the thing. I need more people on my side.
I mean, where do you think it kind of went wrong in terms of values, both within schools, within education, and within society more broadly? What was the point where things started to turn sour?
Well, it's interesting. That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that 50, 60 years or so, the education system has been slowly falling apart. That has been to do with progressive teaching methods taking over and a progressive way of thinking, which is about valuing everyone in the classroom to, all their views and so on, as opposed to the teacher learning and all of that, or leading, I should say. And so it's happened there. But in society, it's all fine if you have a small number of people who are radicals, who are rejecting your country and who are campaigning against the government and all of that. That's fine, you have a small number. But when it becomes the majority, then you have a problem as your country. And I don't know at what point that happened. Look, there were good things, there were good changes that were made in terms of race relations and giving people who are normally don't have much of a break, more of a break. There have been good changes that have been made over the years. I'm pleased that women have the vote. I am pleased that I'm allowed to have a bank account. I'm not arguing against any of those things. But we've gone far too far the other way. the universities at the moment are kind of brainwashing kids into believing that listening to Germaine Greer give a talk, it shouldn't be allowed. You know, she's no platform. There's something wrong. And school is meant, and university is meant to be about challenging people and making you think. And now it's about teaching everyone to think in this group way where nobody ever questions any of those views. And so that's why we go back to the question where you said, am I surprised by the reaction of the education establishment? I'm not, because funnily enough, they are so conservative that they refuse to question any of their hard-held beliefs. I'm the radical. I'm the revolutionary, right? I mean, that's what's so funny. I'm the one marching in saying, we need a revolution in thought. We need diversity. I'm the one that believes in diversity, not them. Their understanding of diversity is, do we have enough black people? Do we have enough Indian people? Do we have enough Chinese people? My understanding of diversity is, well, great to have different races. Great to have diversity of thought too, right? Don't ban people from speaking just because they think differently from you. Don't ban people from having a conversation. Just listen to them. Be open to what they might say. I used to be a real leftist, right? I am not one anymore. And that is because I have changed my mind over the years. I am somebody who's always open to changing my mind. And right now, I change my mind about things all the time. In running the school, there are things we do differently from what we did when we started. You know, right now, we're 5 years in and we do things differently. I mean, of course we do. Because that's how you make things better, by being open to changing your mind. And what saddens me is that too much of the educational establishment, but also our general society and our political class in particular, refuse to change their minds on much.
I mean, to finish on a positive note,
Yeah.
so obviously you've put a huge amount of effort into school over the last, was it 5 years now?
Yes.
I mean, where do you kind of see it going over the next 5 years, next 10 years? What's kind of like the roadmap?
Yeah. So we've applied to open up another school in Stevenage, which would be a very different intake to the one that we've got here, and I think that'd be really exciting. We're waiting to hear from the DFE at the moment, but because everybody's involved in Brexit, it has stopped the rest of the world from existing and proceeding, so we don't know what's happening. But hopefully we'll find out soon. That's really exciting. I mean, ultimately, I'd really like to have a few Michaelas. I'd like to have Michaelas in different parts of, different, with a diverse intake. So, this is in a city, maybe we have something different in Stevenage. I'd like to show that this type of education can work for anyone. I'd also like to show that it can work when I'm not running the ship. Too many people say, well, it's because you run the school, Katharine, that's why it's so successful. And I think, no, actually, it's the ideas, it's the values. That's what fundamentally makes us different. And I want to see more of that, and I want to persuade more people so that other head teachers might copy us.
Well, Katharine, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.